Today we will be covering the Level 2 Sports Turf Operative EPA Handbook in the UK. This is for the apprenticeships, which is awarded by Lantra. A lot of this information may be transferable to other regions and other courses, so you may actually find some of this information within the handbook useful. This is based around what the students are assessed on during their EPA, which means endpoint assessment at the end of their college terms. I will now put the EPA handbook on the screen and briefly go through the important parts, especially those things for the endpoint assessment. So as you can see, this is the cover of the EPA handbook from Lantra. Now, this is version 1.1, which came out in 2023. And again, this is for the Level 2 Sports Turf Operatives. The handbook does highlight everything that we need to know for delivering and the knowledge, the skills, the behaviours for the apprentices to learn, but also does highlight a lot of things for the apprentices and things that they can take out and make use of. As I mentioned, such as the 4 tasks that they will need to complete during their EPA, the knowledge, the questions that they're going to be asked roughly, not the exact questions, but the sort of topics and the things they can be expecting to come up, and also the process of the EPA, the multiple choice questions, the professional discussion, and then the tasks, as I mentioned. The EPA handbook will also outline the guidance on pass criteria. So this is for the distinctions and the passes and the fail marks. These will be broken down into different parts. And if you get a pass in a certain area, but you get distinction in other areas, it sort of limits what sort of grade you can get overall. So it is important that you try your best to achieve a distinction across the board to get the full grades. Now, going through some of this, we can see obviously the health and safety, all the important bits, but not necessarily important for the recording today. A lot of the things go over the whole course in general, so not just health and safety within the workplace, but also, equality, diversity, and those sort of things as well. Their entry requirements. Gateway is the area which you basically go into once you've completed all your assignments and your college work, and then that's when you just prepare ready for your EPA. So here we have the different EPA methods. So as I mentioned, we have the multiple choice paper tests, we have the practical with the questions, and then that professional discussion right at the end, which can last up to 60 minutes. I'll do a completely different video based around the professional discussion, and we'll go over answering some of those questions as well, which might come up during the professional discussion. But it's all based around things that you've learned prior, problem solving as well. So if you're asked a question and you're not quite sure the answer, you can sort of work it out as you go along, as long as you're not prompted by the person assessing you. You can provide information that you know from memory also. So here we can see the apprenticeship standards and which methods that they're going to be assessed by. So for example, we've got the first one, we've got K1, environmental health and safety legislations and regulations. This is going to come up in the multiple choice test A. This might also come up in the professional discussion, so it's something to bear in mind as well. It's not always strict to each particular part, but you will be talking about, your health and safety regulations and legislations during your EPA when you're talking about tasks, and even when you're doing your practical tasks as well. So this is just a sort of brief idea on what you're going to be asked during those multiple choice questions. So we often go over our weeds, our turf pests, diseases and disorders. So this is a good example. So these are the ones you're most likely going to come up against. There's going to be other ones, but these are the ones which I try and train my apprentices around because they're the most common, and also the ones which come up during the EPAs and are in the handbook. So it makes the most sense to learn those particular diseases, pests, and problems. The whole process of your EPA should be one-to-one. So this will be with the assessor and yourself, the apprentice. It will take the vast majority of the day, so please do be aware of that. With the practical discussion at the end also taking 60 minutes, so please make use of the whole of that time. There will be a lot of time, so be prepared to answer those questions in full, in depth, not just 1 or 2 word answers. So as I mentioned about those practical tasks, you will need to be able to do these independently without any prompts. You also need to be able to do these in a safe and effective manner. So ensuring that you're using the right piece of machinery for the right job that you're trying to achieve, but also that you're doing it in a safe manner. Any serious breaches of any health and safety will result in a fail. So it is important that you try your best and make sure that you're working as safely as possible. All of the apprentices taking the EPA must complete all of the practicals to pass the test. You must achieve at least a pass on each one of the practicals to be able to pass the test overall. To achieve a distinction, you must achieve at least 3 distinctions for 3 of the tasks. One can be a pass, and then you can get an overall distinction. Now, depending on where these tasks take place, it is important to familiarize yourself not only with the location, but the tools themselves. If it's within your workplace, it's a little bit easier because it's what you're used to day to day. But if you are taking it at a college or an off-site campus, for example, or somewhere else, then please do take a bit of time before the test, maybe a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks, to ensure that you're familiar with your washdown bays, your health and safety procedures, your meeting points, any legislation that might be different. It might be working near watercourses, for example, but also the equipment itself, ensuring that you're familiar with the on-off buttons, the safety switches, and how those machines operate, and that you're fully trained and competent to use that machinery before your EPA, because we don't want you to fail. So the 4 tasks that you're going to be doing during your EPA for the level 2 sports turf, we've got calibrate and apply 1 material to sports turf surface. We've got set up and mow a sports turf surface to specification using a cylinder mower. We've got prepare and operate a non-mowing attachment on a tractor. This includes using the 3-point linkage and a trailer implement. Set and mark out sports turf surfaces. This does not have to be a full field. So with task 1, which is to calibrate and apply 1 material to a sports turf surface, these are the important things we're going to pick out. It needs to be seeding or overseeding, top dressing, or some sort of granular fertilizer. You can use things that are mixed with sands and biostimulants or soil amendment material, but please do make your assessor aware of exactly what you're putting down and why you're putting it down, and that will tick a lot of boxes off on your knowledge as well. It's important to have an understanding of what we're actually doing to ensure that we're doing it safely and correctly. The area can range between 50 and 500 square meters. Now, this is roughly from, an 18-yard box to half a football pitch, but to ensure that you can complete the task within the time slot that you've been given. Each task has a different time slot, and you will need to be able to complete it within this time to pass the test. No one wants to do half a field and then leave it for later on as well. For the calibration and application of a fertilizer or a material to sports turf surface, so the estimated duration for task 1 is 45 minutes, and this includes any sort of questioning during the observation. Task 2, set up and mow a sports turf surface using a cylinder mower. Cylinder mower being the most important bit in this. If it is a pedestrian machine, it can be up to 100 square meters, or should cover a minimum of 100 square meters. And if it's a ride-on machinery, triple a fairway mower, it needs to be a minimum of 300 square meters. It's important to know that. It's important to know also how to measure that out. So 10 times 30, 300 square meters. You can do this with a tape measure, you can do it with a measuring wheel. But you must be able to mark out and identify how big that area is as well. So please also make yourself familiar with those measurement terms. Again, we've got 45 minutes for this second task. It's really important that we've got, same with the first task, we've got the correct PPE on. We're aware of the health and safety, the regulations, fuel, anything like that. We've also set the machine up, so we've done some pre-start checks. We're happy that the machine is good to go. It's been fueled, it's been greased, and the cuts have been checked. It's safe to use, no parts are missing. All of those things we've covered, but this is more to make you familiar with the EPA documentation. Practical 3, which is prepare and operate and use a non-mowing attachment on the tractor, including a 3-point linkage and a trailer implement. So it's pretty much as simple as it sounds. You need to be able to use and operate a tractor, obviously, safely, and also then operate and attach your equipment to the tractor. Easy things, quadruplays, Amazons. There's lots of different options, rakes, brushes that you can put on there that might not even require the PTO. Same with a trailer. Just make yourself familiar with those pieces of machinery. Use them, drive around, reverse them a bit. Just be aware of your surroundings, just to ensure that you're familiar before you get round to your EPA. You must follow all of the legislation, so all of the pre-start checks, signing out that machinery before you do use it, going around and checking it, ensuring that it's safe after you've used it, ensuring that it's clean after you've used it as well is really important, ready for that next person. If there are any damages or issues, they need to be reported, and you need to make your assessor aware of what you've done and why you've done it as well. It's not going to hurt you if a machine is broke. Say it's broke, but also then don't use it. If it is broke, don't use it. For this task, you get 60 minutes, so a little bit longer than the first two, and this also includes that questioning time. So your fourth and final task, which is questionably probably the most easiest, which is set out and mark out a sports turf surface. Doesn't have to be a full field, but you do need to be aware of using the 3-4-5 method to square off a corner. So preferably you want to be marking out a fresh area, probably an 18-yard box, for example. Gives you a few ideas and a few different techniques to mark out and measure that area. You can do your diagonals to work out if the area is square as well. But also if you're doing the D's on the edge of a box, the penalty spots also helps go towards your grading. The apprentice must be able to mark out accurately a 30-meter line with the line marking machine. These lines need to be a minimum of 50 mil up to 120 mil in thickness. Then you must also be able to mark a line perpendicular to that original line using that 3-4-5 method that I've just mentioned, and this must be a minimum of 5 meters. So on the inside of the right angle, the apprentice must mark out an arc with a 1 meter radius. So this can be used on a corner or corner quad. So you must be able to dash out and then also mark that. You can use a measuring tape, for example, for that marking. All the markings must be very clear. They need to be straight and without any sort of deviations off that line. If you do go off the line, it's not the end of the world. Go back, try it again, go over it. But it is important that we practice this before our EPA. Mention to the assessor if you do go wrong, why you've gone wrong. Perhaps you may need to do it. You might need to wash the paint off and restart, or just do anything that you do during your normal working week and what you've been taught in college. This is a simulated task, but needs to be applied to a natural sports turf surface. This can be a lawn or any sort of mown grass area, but ideally it is natural and not an artificial pitch. It should be a clear area that needs to be marked out or is able to be marked out, as opposed to going and marking in a car park on tarmac, for example. There will be follow-up questions to ensure that you understand what you have done and why you have done it. So it's important to keep in mind, the legislation around paint use, washing machinery, and the rules and regulations for the particular sport that you're marking out for. So when the ball goes out of play, if it touches the line, if it goes over the line, for example. You will get up to 45 minutes for this task as well. So it's important you use that whole time. Talk to the assessor about the various things that you're doing, why you're doing it, and the health and safety behind it. Will help, again, keep ticking those boxes off as you're going through the EPA. And last but not least is professional discussion. Now, I will cover this a little bit more in another video, but this goes over the duration of 60 minutes and consists of 2 parts. Part 1 will take place in the room free of any sort of distractions, and part 2 will take place alongside the facility walk, so that you'll go out with the assessor and just spend some time walking around the site. You might talk about things that you walk past on the way, so please be aware that this is also part of your assessment. You walk past some litter, you walk past some debris, they might quiz you and ask you what you would do in that situation. Any time traveling between the 2 locations will not count towards the overall duration of the EPA assessment, so the clock will be stopped. Also bear that in mind if you've got to walk all the way across the site to another area to be able to carry on answering those questions. There is a question bank for the practical discussion, so you're not going to be asked anything stupid. You're not going to be asked anything that you aren't expected to know within the level 2 framework. So as long as you know everything within this handbook and you've gone through everything with your assessor and your tutor and you're sure that you're ready for the EPA, then I'm pretty sure you'll be okay and manage to get at least a pass. But let's keep hoping and aiming for those distinctions. Now, there will be a minimum of 1 question per knowledge, skill and behavior topic area. So in total, you will have 12 questions during your EPA. You can refer to your portfolio during the discussions, so don't let the assessor keep you away from your laptop. This doesn't mean you can go on Google, but you can go onto your OneFile or wherever you've got your portfolio saved, and you're able to access your documents and go through and reference those as well, because that is your work. And I'm going to leave it there on the professional development point of view, because, like I say, I'll go through this in a little bit more detail in the next video, or another video, should I speak. And the last thing that I'm going to mention for your level 2 qualification, which you'll need to have prepared before your EPA, but part of the EPA handbook, is to ensure that you've got all of your evidence, all of your assignments are completed, all your safety documentations in your profile, in your portfolio, and all completed and up to date before you go on to your EPA. Your tutor will talk to you through all of these different parts of the assessments and when you're collecting evidence and collecting data, but it's obviously in here, so I have to mention it as well. So here are some of those grading marks that I mentioned. So ideally, we want to be aiming for distinctions. And as I said, if we get a pass in certain areas, it might limit the ability to be able to only get a pass overall, as opposed to a distinction. And the final things I'm really going to mention here is resits and retakes. You can resit if you fail your EPA. Obviously, it's not great, but it's also not the end of the world. Resits need to be taken within those guidelines. So this was within 2 months, up to 6 months, depending on the case. And if you don't complete the EPA within that time, you will need to recomplete the apprenticeship to move on, and you will have failed that apprenticeship and that portfolio of evidence that you've collected. And that's just a brief overview of the information within the EPA handbook. I do suggest that you take your time to go and have a look through it. There's a lot of information in there. It's everything that's going to come up within your course, within your EPA. So it's beneficial to anyone doing the level 2 in sports turf, maybe even the level 3, just to look back and revise on as well. It's information that's available online. We'll put links in the descriptions and below the videos for those watching online, to be able to access the information as well.